I think that I have always been dangerously confident, like recklessly confident that it would be okay eventually. And I did not know how to do it at all. I was way in over my head. It was really complicated, but I just sort of lied and said I could. It's the same attitude I had with the first actual job I had here. I was sent an enormous science fiction book. It was like 700 pages. And they were like, could it be a movie? I was like, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I'll do it.
Okay, we're back, and today on the podcast, we would like to welcome our friend Colby Day. Colby Day is a filmmaker and playwright. He was recently named one of MovieMaker Magazine's 25 screenwriters to watch. Colby wrote the screenplay for the Netflix film SPACEMAN, directed by Johan Renck from Chernobyl. Colby also wrote the upcoming Searchlight Pictures film In the Blink of an Eye, directed by Andrew Stanton. Colby was also a writer on the upcoming season of Apple TV's For All Mankind. He writes the weekly newsletter Hollyweird about living and working in Hollywood, which is a totally normal place. Colby, thank you for coming on the Hollywood Hang.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited.
Me and my silent clap over there. I'm very excited. I already had like 12 questions from your bio.
Great. Okay, let's do it.
First off, why don't you tell us how you got started in the industry? What is your origin story? You know, did you always know you wanted to be a writer? When did this become like a career choice for you?
I feel like origin story is a really like a general meeting trap that I still 10 years into this career have not gotten good at. So bear with me as I try to collect myself. I grew up at the movies. I grew up in the suburbs. We had nothing to do. It was a really small town. My family was not religious, but we like religiously went to the movies. And so I honestly feel like movies were our church a little bit, where like that's what we did every week. And so I think I saw everything and grew up really loving them, but had no concept that that was a job or that people did that or that you could be an artist. My dad was a car salesman. So I saw this Discovery Channel show that was like Movie Magic, and it was like, how did they do the Terminator? And that was the first time that I was like, oh, people did that. Like that was made by people, made the stuff that I'm seeing. And so that I think sort of opened up like, oh, I want to do that. I don't know what that means, but that's what I'm going to do. And my dad's business had a video camera for their company. And my younger brother and I stole that from the office and just started making bad movies at our house, 13-year-old kids doing the X-Files and like Indiana Jones. And so I knew I wanted to do that somehow. And then that sort of became, my high school actually had like a mini DV film class, like in the early days of digital video, and took that class and was like, okay, this is it. And then sort of went to college at NYU for writing, because I think still I was sort of focused on like, well, wait, like, how is this a job? Like, how is making a movie like a job, and how do I get paid to do it? And it felt like writing, if I became a writer for TV, I could like have a job. And that felt really important as a young person of like, oh, like I'll get a paycheck. And then until this year, had never done TV again. Like it never came back to me. I was never allowed to do it. But I left school and really only had made friends with actors and other theater people, actually. And so I just sort of fell into like making plays, because you could make a play for no money in a basement in a way that I just didn't understand how you could make a movie still. And so I sort of got sucked into theater world for a long time, knowing that I wanted to go to Hollywood somehow, but like not knowing anybody there or how to do it or what that would even be. And applied to Juilliard with a play of mine in the hopes that like maybe that'll get me a manager. I don't know. Maybe that'll do something. And a friend of mine read it and really liked it and was like, you should meet this manager guy. I know you want to do movies, right? And so he introduced me to Harry Langsfield, who at the time was like a baby manager just getting started. And I told him, like, hey, I'm going to come to LA like tomorrow. And it really quickly became me sort of going back and forth. And then I delayed going to LA for a long time because I didn't know how I would do it and what it would be and how I would work. And then when I did finally make the move, I like got hired to rewrite a script that I had written, an original feature of mine. Like right as I moved, I like signed a lease, signed with my agents, signed with my manager, signed a deal with Lionsgate like on the same day. It was really crazy entry to LA.
Make it sound so easy.
Yeah, that was after 12 years of not doing anything.
What suburb did you grow up in?
I grew up in Concord, California, which is sort of like an hour out of San Francisco. So I grew up in, my dad worked at BMW Concord. It was a family dealership. And then I grew up in and around Concord. So Walnut Creek, Alamo, these are all towns that like literally nobody has ever heard of.
In terms of going back to the car dealership, was your family supportive of your decision, or was your dad like, you need to sell these cars? What was that conversation?
I worked at the car dealership every summer since I was probably 9. So I did have every job you could have at a car dealership short of making it a career. But no, my parents, I think my dad had lived in the same 20-mile radius his entire life. And so I think was very excited to have kids who wanted to go anywhere and do anything. I think he was a little bit jealous. And so I think very supportive of that. After college, I got a job at a reality TV company and I hated it and I was desperate to leave. And that was sort of the first time my parents were like, what are you doing? Like, what? You're going to quit the entertainment job you got? Like, you're insane. And I remember having to explain to them like, no, there are like different ladders in entertainment and like some of them don't go where you're trying to go. And like, why would I get good at reality TV? But they were very supportive and into it. And I think like as artsy as people can be who aren't artists and didn't go to college and didn't pursue it themselves. Yeah.
This is a really random question, but did you ever write a play about a car dealership?
No, I really want to do a series though. It's a really interesting world. I had no interest in talking about it for a long time when I was younger, but the further away from it I get, the more I realize like, oh, this world is full of really, really interesting people. And the way that they deal with the world, used car people it's like the only industry left where you're allowed to just like lie. Like you just are allowed to say anything to customers. And, it's a really interesting place to like make a living. And I think salespeople are fascinating. I worked in sales after college, not in cars. So I'd love to do something there, but I have yet to do it. It's sort of waiting for how do I do it?
I love when I got out of college, I worked at one of my dad's companies and he did incentives for car dealerships. So they like went and partnered with them, but we would go to like, it was called like NADA and it was this big conference and sometimes it was in Vegas and sometimes it was in New Orleans. And these people won a lot of money. It's like a massive industry as far as like how much they spend. Like there was a company that did just mailing, like pure mail in the mailbox, not email, not digital. And like just the amount of money spent was wild to me. And they all just party. It was a very interesting 2 years of my life.
My dad was doing it it was a BMW dealer in the 80s. So there was like a very specific vibe going on that I think is a really interesting world and I think I love kind of like scuzzy, slimy guys. I grew up around them, and so I think I would love to tell a story there, but I haven't done it yet. It feels a little close to home.
The only reason I asked is because, and I know we're friends and I've never talked about this before, but one time I was in a general meeting and the producer, he mistook me for someone else. And he was like, I know you're going to be great at this because you're such an amazing writer, Nick. You wrote that amazing play about the car dealership. And I felt so awkward that I didn't say anything. And then at the very end, I think his assistant pinged him and he's like, by the way, I'm so sorry. I know you didn't write that. But I was like, wouldn't that be crazy if that was you? And somebody confused us.
I would love it because I do think that there are, I have 4 or 5 friends where I feel like we are on the same little list of like, I should talk to that guy about this type of thing. So I would not be surprised if someone thought I had written a thing that you, or vice versa, that we had written each other's thing.
I have a question. So you say like this 12-year span before everything just like kind of clicks into place.
Yeah.
And like, what did it really look like in the day to day? And were you a little, I always say this, like you have to be a little bit delulu to be like, it's going to work out. It's just like going to take, I don't know yet.
Yes. Yeah. I think that I have always been perhaps dangerously confident, like recklessly confident that it would be okay eventually. And I really do think you're right that like that's sort of imperative to make it in this industry, is just sort of the ability to like hear no for a decade and just sort of be like, well, I'm not wrong, they are. And that's sort of a crazy way to approach the world, but I do think I had that. I was like desperately trying to claw my way into anything for the whole time. Like from college onwards, I was sort of desperately trying to like get a job at The Daily Show or get a job at NBC or to make a movie with friends or get an intern. Like I really was pursuing everything. I wrote a lot. I probably wrote a couple features a year. And I worked a bunch of really weird jobs that weren't entertainment. The most successful job I had, the longest job I had, was a sales job where I would stop people on the street and ask them to sign up for something. And I worked exclusively on commission. And that was a great job. Yeah, well, it was. So in New York, there's this thing where you can sign up. You can choose how your electricity is actually provided, and so what you're paying into as far as like the supply. And so I worked for this company, Green Mountain Energy, which does renewable energy. And so we were sort of like Greenpeace guys. We would stand on the street with a table and be like, "Hey, did you even know you could do this? Like, please stop and talk to me." And if you got people to sign up for wind power, you'd get $50, and you would do that for 12 hours a week. And if you were good and they liked you and you got a good spot, because some of the spots you would earn no money, you could sort of eke out a living. And I knew a lot of actors and writers who did that, because you could work 10 hours and make enough money to survive, and then go do your play, you know. I also worked overnight at the Comedy Central. I was the person who would upload The Daily Show to Comedy Central's website in 2009. I was an intern at The Daily Show, and I really only credit going to NYU to getting that. I think having an application that had NYU's little logo on it is the reason I got that. And so I was an intern there, and I, for a year after that, just kept following up with them to be like, are there jobs? Are you hiring? Do you want people? And the answer was always no. And then discovered that they were hiring this like digital person. And I was like, I could do that. And I did not know how to do it at all. I was way in over my head. It was really complicated, like database management. And like video codecs, but I just sort of lied and said I could. And I think because I had been an intern at Comedy Central, they were nice enough to like write me a note saying, yeah, he's great. So I did that job for a year. I just had a bunch of crappy jobs and did plays. I would go start a theater show at 8:00, get halfway through to intermission. I was producing theater, and then leave to go do my job at the Daily Show's office, where I would just like upload the videos until 5 a.m. and then I'd go to bed.
I will say, I do think it's a really important characteristic of just like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. Like, give me the job and trust that I will do whatever it is to make sure that this uploads in a database.
I did not understand it at all. I really had to learn for a long time. And part of what I think was useful in getting me to learn it is if I failed, I would have to wake my boss up. And so I just was like, I have to learn how to do this so that I do not have to call Rachel, my boss, at 2 a.m. and be like, I don't know, man, it's broken. No one can watch the Daily Show tomorrow. Yeah, I think just saying I can do it. It's the same attitude I had with the first actual job I had here. I was sent an enormous science fiction book. It was like 700 pages. And they were like, could it be a movie? I was like, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I'll do it. And I got that job. It was my first job. And I cracked the book open again and was like, I've made a huge mistake, but I have to figure this out.
What about, you talk about this NYU connection as sort of being a stepping stone. When people ask, because when people ask me, like, should I go to school for this? Should I go to a film school? Like, even though I had a really good experience, for whatever reason, my inclination is always to tell people no. That being said, like, I did get internships, I got opportunities. How do you, when people ask you that question, what's your answer?
Yeah, usually when people ask about film school, I say don't do it. It's qualified advice, right? I think do it if it's free. Do it if your parents can afford to pay for you to go. But I would not go and do it in today's job market and accumulate debt. I just think like the amount of money you're going to spend to learn how to make like a 10-minute thesis film in film school is sort of like, 5 to 10 times what it would cost to just go do that film yourself. And I do think it's valuable in terms of like the networking and the cachet that it gives you on your resume the first 3 years out of school. But there are less expensive ways to like build a community. And so I think if it's going to put you into a position where you can't afford to live, do not do it. It's not worth it. You can learn how to write stuff by writing stuff.
Yeah, the landscape has also changed so fast. Like we weren't even in school that long ago, but like I remember talking to some USC undergrads during COVID, and they were describing when the film school was trying to figure out how do we have the students make films, but not just do like Zoom films, like Unfriended or something. And they were telling me that they had to give the equipment to the actors in their space, and the actors would like set up their own cameras, and I'm like, that is such a bummer, because such a huge part of the reason why you go to film school and do all that is so that you can have this low stakes environment where you're with the actors and learning all that. And it's like these people are paying full tuition to have to, it just, and obviously it's not that way anymore, but it was a moment for me where I was like, things change very, very fast. And yeah, like you said, like go do it Sean Baker style and just like film it on the street until you get kicked out of somewhere, you know?
I also think the other sort of like qualifier I would give to the should I or shouldn't I go is like go to a premiere, one of the top 3, or don't do it. Like, yeah, it's not, there are many film programs, and they are not all equally valuable. The real value is the like brand, unfortunately. And so I think like going to USC, great. Going to NYU, great. And then I genuinely think everything other than those two is like a different tier where you should really consider like, is this beneficial to me or am I beneficial to them?
That's like I feel like it's a very real thing. I obviously am more on like the business side in my day to day. And I feel like anyone who takes that path loves that they went to one of those top schools, because everyone that they ended up in the mailroom with then is the same people they went to school with. They all knew, which is just wild to be like, I guess you guys know really young, but to be like, I want to be an agent. I'm going to go to USC and I'm going to go through that program and then go to a mailroom where they pay me $19 an hour. But I feel like there's a benefit to the business side of it so much. But like, I went to University of Missouri. I do get bummed that I didn't have the like network, but I feel like I moved out here and met amazing people.
I think, like 90% of a career in entertainment is like your own self-starterness, like your own can-do-itness. And I think people who have that will do that anywhere. But I think you should take that into consideration of like, is that the thing that's going to get me ahead? Or is this program the thing that's going to get me ahead? And I think often it's the indefatigable human spirit that's doing it, not the institution.
That's like, doesn't Tom Cruise have that quote where he's like, I was not the most talented in my class, but I was the most determined to make sure that this worked out for me.
He does remain the most determined man in the universe.
I want to bounce forward a little bit just so I don't blow all the time on the origin story. I want to talk about some of the stuff something you're doing now, because this is really interesting to me, and I haven't really talked to you about it that much yet. I want to talk about your Substack because I read your latest one this morning. It was great.
Thank you.
But I also just feel like it is, for whatever reason, somewhat uncommon for writers to put out resources to help other writers. Or not as common as like I would love for it to be. So like, why did you start the newsletter? What was your thought process there, and how has the reception been so far? How are you finding it?
I appreciate you saying that about it being a resource, because I do think that was my intent. And I think that there are, I think when you become interested in like working in Hollywood, there's 100 podcasts, including now this, that you can listen to. And I think that those of them that are specifically like craft or career focused, I think like script notes, for example, like I just don't think there are that many views that are from sort of like the entry level and mid-tier writers. And I think a lot of the advice and craft stuff you get is from people who are like sort of grandfathered into a system that doesn't exist anymore. I just don't think the business works the way that a lot of these people interacted with the business. And I think as I was starting to work here, I really felt this like, how do I even get the answer to this question? Like, is it normal to have to pitch a movie 8 times? Is it normal to be asked to do this for free? And I don't think that, like, as much as I love John August and Greg Mason, I don't think they're experiencing the like work-a-day career that anyone I know is. And so I felt a really strong impulse to like demystify that, both for other people as a service and also selfishly for myself, because it's impossible to get the answer. You cannot get the answer from other people unless you sort of are like, this is what's going on for me. Is this normal? And when I started writing an end of year, sort of like, here's what I did this year, and posting that a few years ago before I started Hollyweird, that's the first time I heard from other writers like, that's exactly what my year was like. Thank you for saying this. Yes, it is this bad.
The internet has done something kind of amazing. My sisters are both moms, and they share memes back and forth all the times where like these really niche specific things that you would only know if you're a mom, that like clearly every mom was feeling and no one knew until the other mom started saying it. And they're like, wait, you think your kid's an asshole? My kid's an asshole. And it's like, it feels like that sometimes with writers where you're like, wait, you had to pitch and they said yes in the room and they took it away and that's okay. And like, this is life and we move on. Like all of that is just like, and you're like, oh, okay. It makes you feel less sad, I think, when you're like, it's not me. It is a game that we're all playing, and like, let it roll off your shoulders. And I think that's what when I'm jealous of your name, Hollyweird is so good.
Thank you.
I was
We
like,
totally would have
is-
taken that for the podcast if you hadn't. Yeah.
I
yes.
genuinely, part of why I started this newsletter is like I had a name and I was like, this is going to be gone if I don't do this now.
No, I love it. And it's just really comforting to watch someone, you're like rungs up the ladder, but to be like, okay, like it's all slowly, surely, but happening. And this is what you look forward to, and kind of like learn that this is also how much work it is and how many things don't pan out.
I think that, and Nick, I feel like you just posted a video about this, the idea that like there's sort of this fake, like it will get easier later thing that I think we kind of all fall into as a trap because it's really hard now. And so there's a sort of like, well, hopefully someday it's not this hard. And I do think I fool myself once a year into thinking that there's a project that will be easy. And none of them are easy. It's really hard to make a movie. It's really hard to do it if you're super successful. It's really hard to do it if you're in the beginning of your career. It's not, there is no easy movie. And I think it's easy to see someone else's success and be like, oh, they must have been easy for them. And I think part of why I wanted to write about what I was doing every week is like, it is literally never easy. It's a tremendous amount of work every single time.
Yeah, no, I always find value in the newsletters, but I do think my favorite thing you've done is the end of year wrap up and the month by month play by play diary, because like you said, it's just even amongst my other writer friends that I'm frequently talking to, it's just we don't necessarily always share updates because it's like we know that updates aren't usually real updates. Like it's just like, oh yeah, this thing's chugging along and like another meeting, but it's like it is one of the most incredible resources to see you in real time going through. Even you can go back a couple of years and see projects that you've done that have now come out. And it's just like, it's a level of transparency that is just not, we never get. Like there's even some writers who have recently published funny books about like anecdotes from the industry, but those are not like, here's all the meetings it took. Those are like funny anecdotes from set or like actors who said they were going to walk off. Like, that resource just it doesn't really exist. And it's almost like you know how Soderbergh does that like really elaborate thing where he lists like every media he's consumed, whether it's like an episode of a TV show, a book, and he releases these crazy lists. It's like that, where it's like you can literally see this person's everything their brain was, going through their mind for like that month in time. And it's unbelievable. Like I've even had like moments where I have, a bunch of things I'm working on and I just feel I'm having a rough spot. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back and look at some of the stuff Colby was working on this year, this time, because it just helps you feel better. It's like, oh yeah, like this is normal. Like it doesn't feel normal, but this is just the way it goes. And it's like often terrible.
I really laughed at you finding solace in it because it doesn't feel reassuring as you lay it out to yourself. It's like, oh, I spent 12 meetings on this thing for 9 months and then they didn't do it. And that the amount of that in this business is sort of what made me want to write them, because I was like, this can't be how it is for everyone else. I must be the problem here somehow. And I do think it was at least reassuring to hear from other people who I, think are maybe doing it better or have an easier time. Like, no, I too worked on 25 projects and one was allowed to continue into next year. It wasn't chosen, but it was allowed to not be done. Yeah. It's a very weird business. And I have this like, maybe one day it didn't used to be this way. Maybe there was a world where you used to have a sustainable career and you didn't have to have 85 things. And I think some of that is true, and sort of like the loss of residuals and the loss of like financial stability. But I do think it has always been a really crazy career, and nobody talks about it. It's hard to remember all the bad stuff. You kind of put it away because you just are like, well, then I did get it. But like that came after 25 meetings with the same two people saying, no, not yet.
I also think it's hard because people don't know, bless writers. No one knows who a writer, like Gabrielle Union was posting about some movie she was in and she was like, wait, M. Night Shyamalan wrote this? Like, no one knows who the writer is at any given time. And it's like fine, but it's also the thing where it's like, yeah, you think of Shonda, but Shonda didn't write Bridgerton. And it's all these people really working where it's like, that's who you're actually aspiring to. Don't aspire to Shonda or whoever this, like, Christopher Nolan, bless your heart if you are. But like, to do that is to like miss this whole level of where you really learn and the people doing what your next step is. And I think like that's the importance of being like, reading you.
That's very nice to hear. I think that there is a sort of like industry-wide like change in what to aspire to over the last 20 years, though, where like the career of working screenwriter looks very, very different from what it looked like. The amount of like mid-range movies is much smaller. Like I remember having a very disheartening conversation with my team about like, I had envisioned writing good adult films that were mid-range films. And they were like, yeah, that's not, we can't tell you that that's a career anymore. Like, good luck.
Wait,
dude.
I want to say mid-range. Are you saying like 5 to 15 million?
Yeah. Like, is there a world where you could write up to 30, you know?
Yeah, like I feel like people don't even realize like under 30 is like, that is mid-range where you're kind of like, I'm trying like as Good Will Hunting. Like I'm trying to think of like, I just read that script. I'm like, these like real stories that people like look back on and so fondly, and it's like, they just don't get made anymore.
Yeah, I had a movie I was pitching with directors that was sort of like would have been like a $10 to $15 million film, and the deals all sort of fell apart because no one was going to earn enough money, and it just sort of like gave me this big existential crisis of like, wait, whose career am I following? Like, who am I trying to become someday? Because I don't know that like a David Koepp is born anymore, you know, like that sort of like adult writer of good but not huge movies is a really hard feature career to aspire to. So I do think it's worth like looking at your peers and the people who are like one step above you for guidance, and not even people who started 10 years ago. Like it just the ecosystem is so different, and it moves very fast and is weird. Sorry, that's sort of just like a dark tangent, but it has rattled my core. I can't get over it.
You obviously had a big feature, and now you're going to have TV. Are you still like feature is where I want to live all of my days, or are you mixing?
I mean, I'm dabbling in both. I have a series that I have for a long time been trying to sell and set up, and that continues. I don't think my brain works in TV brain very well. Like I like a story to start and end. I like a world to ask a question and then leave the audience with that. And I think it's very rare for me to have an idea where I'm like, great, we could hang out with these characters for 25 hours. I love TV. I watch a lot of TV, but I think I like to be able to start and stop a thing and put it away and have said what I need to say about it. And I think before I worked in that sales job, I quit every job I had within like 6 months. And I think I get bored of stuff. And once I've learned how it works, I kind of am like, okay, bye. And why I like movies is right when you get bored of how does this thing work, you're done. And then you get to be like, okay, well, I'll do a new one. So I would never say no to someone asking me to do a job. But I definitely feel more inspired in movie land for sure.
Has anything happened to you in terms of, you obviously had Spaceman come out on Netflix, you know, good budget, good movie star in there. Like that is on the surface, like success, right? Like people around you, probably your family, people who like don't understand the industry. They're like, oh, Colby has like made it. Like this will be easy for him now. And then of course, like For All Mankind. They're like, this guy wrote a movie that has the word space in the title. Like, he should be on our space show.
He could do a show. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But is there, and
That
then
is
you
what
have
happened.
In the Blink of an Eye, which I want to talk about because I love that script. But are you being thrown space stuff now? And how have you dealt with that? Because I know you have like so many other, like I've read other scripts of yours that are great, that are different, that are more drama. And I know you want to direct stuff like that as well. So how have you dealt with that? Like, have you been bombarded with like, here's a space thing?
The first script I had that anyone read in Hollywood was In the Blink of an Eye, which has space in it. It's not all a space movie, but it has space in it. And so that really quickly became like, great, this guy can like tell a good story that has space. Could you adapt this space book? Could you adapt this other space book? And he loves space and only wants to do space. We are holding space for him. So the quotient of like, how desperate are you to do stuff changes over your career, hopefully. And I was desperate to do stuff. And so I just said yes to all of them. And now I've written probably 3 or 4 movies with space. And I feel like I don't have anything left to say about space at all. And so I still get asked in meetings if I want to do that. And I kind of just say no at this point. I think there's a tendency. I wish I liked repeating myself, but I don't. I have a really hard time with that. And I think that the business would like you to repeat yourself because then there's a quantifiable thing you're doing. But I feel pretty tapped out on space, and I like genre, so when stories are interesting and have a cool hook, I respond. But the bar for how cool it would have to be for me to want to pursue a space project is pretty high at this point. I have other things I'd like to get to show on screen, even,
Are they underwater? Are they just going to be like, you've done space, take it under?
The space of the ground. Yeah, exactly. No, I would love to get to do every meeting I've been in. I'm like, I want a cool ghost story. Find me a good ghost story. I would love to do stuff that's just not what I've done before, and get to. I think once I've done something, I'm like, yeah, I did it. I don't want to ever think about that again. And it means there's always novelty, but it means that every time I bring something to my agents or a producer, it's like a new thing. And they're a little bit like, wait, we just convinced everyone you're the space guy. What are you doing?
I don't know how much you can talk about it, but I wanted to ask you about In the Blink of an Eye because, and you mentioned that was kind of like the first big circulating sample you had, right? Which is crazy to me because it's, for writers, like first thing that gets out there, like it's a pretty like ambitious project, and it has like this huge scope. Mm-hmm. I've read it like tons of times. I think it's so good. How has that? Because what year was that on the blacklist?
It was on the 2016 blacklist. Yeah, 2016 because I moved here and it was on the blacklist. So yeah, I feel very, very ready for it to come out. I don't have any new thoughts about how to do In the Blink of an Eye. I wrote it. I started writing it in 2014, and I think it will come out in 2025. And that honestly feels about right for a big, complicated, ambitious movie. 11 years. So I'm ready for it to come out. I'm excited about it. I think we all made the same movie, which doesn't always happen as you're making a movie. I think sometimes you all have different ideas of what you're doing. And so I feel very proud of it and ready to. I would love to get to talk about it with people because it's just the secret finished movie that's waiting to come out, and that feels crazy.
Is the emotion similar with Spaceman? I mean, Spaceman was adapted from a book, right? So that's not something that has been your, like, personally inside of you for so long that came from your brain. Is it a very different sort of feeling?
I was really protective of In the Blink of an Eye. I mean, part of why it took so long is I said no to opportunities and people who had sort of misaligned visions for what the movie might be. None of the offers I got as a first-time screenwriter were like, wow, this is going to change your life like forever. You should definitely sign and like give away this thing that's important to you. They were sort of like, well, maybe we'd option it and then someone else would fix it. I was like, I don't, I'm going to say no. Spaceman was an adaptation. And so it doesn't have the like, this is birthed from my, weird thoughts in my living room a decade ago. But I don't know, what I've come to learn is it's not that different emotionally for me. I can't really not care a lot. It feels really personal, even though it's, a translation sort of, right? You're taking someone else's thing. So I think that every cut of Spaceman I saw, I had thoughts about like this frame I don't like, and I would cut this sooner. And I just am a perfectionist, and I'm growing to learn that that's going to be true no matter what. And that's part of why it never gets easier, is because I want everything to be perfect. And if it's not, I get frustrated.
I so wish I was a contentable human.
Yeah. My wife and I talk about this. There is just sort of like a plight of being ambitious, which is that you even when you achieve the thing, you're not really satisfied because you still are ambitious enough to want something bigger, that just is sort of like the curse of wanting to be an ambitious artist, is it's hard to enjoy it because it's hard to know when to enjoy it. But it's also hard because you just are sort of thinking ahead to how do I do it again, but bigger, better, more.
I think people talk about it in psychology, but it's like sometimes getting what you want can like lead to the crash out, because you get the thing you've always been chasing, but now you don't know what to do. And that feeling also doesn't live up to what you've been chasing and how inspired you were and all that. So it's...
Yeah, I think psychologists are right. Yeah, I think that's accurate. Might have a point. Yeah, I had this conversation after Spaceman came out because it was a big movie. It had big stars. It had big directors. It went to a big festival. I earned a lot of money. I was not satisfied with the outcome. And so that was a big learning curve of like, why did I get into this career? Why do I do this at all? I got all these sort of like external metrics of success, and they're not fulfilling me. And so what did I even start doing this for? And I used to make movies for no money and plays in basements. And so like there's a component of like creative play that didn't exist on Spaceman. It was a big movie and I was not in charge, and shot during like lockdown. And I think it sort of was like, oh, right, there's like another part to making stuff that I really value and is, you have to pay your bills, but like is equally valuable to me. Which is just like getting to make things with other people and feeling included in that.
I feel like that's what I love about Coleman Domingo with Sing Sing, where he was like, I do these other big things because I get this project that like I get to change people's lives and change my life and do what I really wanted to. And you're like, that sounds like a perfect mixture.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of reasons people get into this career, and you sort of constantly have to be thinking about your own, like, what are your metrics for success? Because the industry has very different metrics for success, and to go write the Fantastic Four 2 would be like an enormous success for some people. If that's not why you got into doing this, no amount of doing it is then going to make you feel successful.
That's 8 Fantastics. That's
the 8tastic 4.
Yeah. You mentioned about In the Blink of an Eye about turning down opportunities for that script.
Yeah.
This is interesting to me. So I think often when people have a script that not everyone is breaking down their door to be a part of that project, when you have something that's like there's no bidding war. It is a script that is like, it's important to you, but it just is existed for a long time, and there's not a million people who want to do it, and then you finally get somebody who does want to do it, how do you say no to that? I'm asking for myself and for people listening. Like, how do you figure out after all that time, okay, this is the opportunity to say yes to? Because writers we're like sensitive, right? And it's like, oh, no one wants this. Oh, now somebody does want this, but you're going to say no.
Yeah. I felt crazy saying no. It didn't feel easy. I had moved to Hollywood that year. So it was insane to do that. But I think I tried to project ahead. How will I feel having done this once it is done? Like in 5 years, the movie comes out or doesn't come out, and it's not my thing. It's a different thing, and someone else gets credit. And I kind of just tried to project out, like, what's the likely outcome here, and am I gonna really like that? And I think for In the Blink of an Eye, it is not like people were banging down my door. I had one or two people who were sort of like, this is interesting. We would need to do a lot to it. And I do think to what you're saying, Kristen, early on, of like, I think I had a confidence that no, you don't. Like, it doesn't require being a totally different thing. And if you want to do a totally different thing, you should do that. Like, why buy this one? Like, this one is this thing. And so I think that thinking about, okay, if it comes out and it's a totally different movie, am I going to be happy or not? The answer was always not. And then when I met Andrew, who ended up directing the movie, the first questions he asked me were like, why does this happen on this page? What does this mean to you? And I was like, oh, you're a good writer and you want to understand the movie. You're not coming with like, I just wish there was more conflict. And you're like, what are you asking for? So I think he was direct, and he was open to wanting to understand it to the best of his ability. And that sort of felt like, oh, I don't know what more I could ask for from a collaborator than like them wanting to know exactly what I wanted. And then they're going to make other decisions potentially, but they at least want to know why everything works the way it works. And Andrew and I went through every page of the movie and every transition and the scene. And he was like, why is this what happens? Why does he do this? Why does she do that? He just wanted to understand it all. And I think that was the key to me of like, oh, this guy is gonna, even if we disagree later, we're speaking the same language, you know?
I have a question. Do you feel this strongly about all of your scripts? Or are there some where you're like, if, you know, Netflix came over today and was like, hey, do you have a script about a doll? And you were like, I do. You guys can have it. Like, do you have any of those? Or are you like, no, these are all I really care?
I think I keep tricking myself into like, oh no, this one I wouldn't care that. Like, they could do whatever to this one. And then people start to propose compromised versions of them. And then I realize, no, I am just precious. And I think that has been part of my evolution too, of like, I think I started out this career really just wanting a career and a job and like to earn money doing this. And what I have learned as I've done it is, obviously I like the money, but that's not, there is a secondary thing I care more about. And that is like making a vision come, be expressed. And so I think I just am exacting, and it is hard for me to, be like, yeah, whatever, go do what you want to do. I don't care. And I have friends who are writers who are like that. And I envy it a little bit, but I don't have that.
I do wonder if that maybe is a trajectory a lot of writers feel, because like right now I'm at like, please buy something from me, anything, I'll do anything for paycheck. And then maybe in a few years I'll be like, oh no, don't touch that one that way. Like, back it up, friends.
Yeah, the quotient of like, I got to pay my bills, it changes over time, hopefully. And so I think it's like a book adaptation I did was that 700-page sci-fi book. And I was like, yeah, I don't know, man, I'll just do something and you guys do whatever you want to do.
As we kind of wind down here, I wanted to make sure to ask you, this is kind of a more broad, like philosophical question, but like where does the industry go from here? And interpret that however you want. Like I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and he was like, you know what? Like, this is the year where you just do it yourself. And I was like, what do you specifically mean by that? And he was like, this is just the year where you do it yourself.
Yeah.
But it's obviously like we're at a very specific point in the industry right now, like post strikes, what happens this year?
Wow. I for just our listeners, I made a big scared face as Nick started to ask this question. Where does the industry go? I think we are in a decade of do it yourself. I would sort of extend that to just like this is the era we live in, is like you have to do it yourself. My wife is a documentary producer, and more of our conversations within our household are like, oh, I don't know if I can trust the institution to support me. I think I have to do it. I don't know that I can trust the distributor to support me. I think we have to figure out distribution ourselves. Like I just think we are in sort of like a seismic shift within the industry because so many of like the pipelines are broken. And so I do sort of feel on like a grand scale, people are really hungry for interesting, good movies, but like the pipeline to bring that to them does not exist. It's really, there's maybe one or two of those pipelines remaining, and there used to be a lot. And so I sort of feel like we are all sort of stuck trying to do it ourselves, and nobody is coming to like reinvent Hollywood for us. We are going to have to do that ourselves. And that is daunting, and I don't want to do that, which is why I made that big sad face. But I think that that's where we are.
I have a question to that. What does that look like to you? Because I think sometimes for me, even being like, okay, I so exist in the business that I'm like, I must find producer, and then we will still end up selling it into this. But what does it look like for you?
The fact that Netflix like releases movies and does not market them. And I think Amazon is a similar thing. And I think we've built this ecosystem where the end goal that we're all pursuing, which is you sell the movie to someone and then they show the movie, doesn't really translate to the desired outcome anymore. And so I think it feels really broad, but I think like going through the process of like, okay, no producers and studios in today's marketplace are that interested in risk taking. So how do I find allies who want to take a risk with me? And that I think means more non-traditional financing. I think that means like more white knight investors rather than like institutional and company investors. And I also think it means trying to build more creative distribution models yourself rather than rely on a big company to kind of like just dump it on their platform.
And lastly, we have one final question for you. Since Hollywood is filled with highs, lows, and hell no's, could you share one little anecdote with us from your career that fits into one of those three categories?
I think I have a high and a low that's one. So I'm sort of going to straddle it into one story. In 2017, I had met with Eric Heiserer, who wrote Arrival, very smart guy. And he had a short story that he was like, this could be a TV show, I think. I don't really have time for it. And I read it and it was really cool. And so we pitched it to Hulu. And Hulu read the short story and was like, great, we'll buy the series. We want the pilot. Colby will write the pilot. We did not pitch anything other than Eric Heiserer wrote a short story. It's cool. Here's the story. So I was really quickly hired to write a TV show, which I had never done. I had moved to Hollywood 1 year prior, and it was like this incredibly insane high. And then I outlined the show and they were like, what is this? They immediately were like, hold on, what is the show? Why is it like this? Couldn't it be something else? And I really panicked and just kept turning in new outlines based on the executive notes, and nobody liked any of them. Eric didn't like any of them. He was creating Shadow and Bone at the same time, so he was also too busy to really oversee me. And so what started as like a, wow, I'm going to make a show, it's going to be this insane cool thing for Hulu, really quickly became a summer of me like doing new outlines and them getting increasingly frustrated that we didn't know what the show was. And so I think I did 8 outlines of what a pilot might be. And then they said, actually, we're going to let you go. And you can either write something for us as like a blind pilot and we'll pay the rest of your fee for that, or I guess we have to pay you for this one. And I really thought about it and I was like, I think you should just pay me for this one and I'm gonna go. So I sold a show and got fired from the show within about 3 months. And it really did put me off TV for a long time. It was 7 years before I came back to TV. So it was a high and a low in summer of 2017.